Since it's May the 4th be with you, Star Wars Day, we're going to be revisiting one of my favorite series to discuss in an academic psychology manner, and that is Star Wars. So, growing up with the prequels and, of course, watching the original trilogy and even those sequel trilogy out there, the sequel trilogy, I have lots of thoughts on the symbolic meaning, the psychological meaning. Thank you for joining. And as always, if you have ideas for streams or requests, please send them, let me know. But on Star Wars Day, thought it would be useful to talk about the personality types of the Star Wars universe. So, in case you don't really know the series or need a refresher, the story chronologically begins with episodes 1 and ends with I guess you would call it episode 9 of the Rise of Skywalker. So there's 9 mainstream movies that tell the saga of essentially the Skywalker family. Debatably, that last trilogy does not really. It tells the story of Rey, who, spoiler, is a Palpatine, which is interesting because we'll get into it. But the Palpatine family is maybe not what you think, because I did some diving into a book that came out about Palpatine, and I'm going to see if it's canon, because that's going to change a lot. But okay, so interesting. What is canon about Palpatine? I want to see what's canon about Palpatine. The story is of Anakin Skywalker, who was a slave boy for the planet of Tatooine, a desert planet that is considered somewhat backwoods, like a redneck planet. Okay, so Anakin Skywalker is born to a virgin mother of force molecules called midichlorians. And if you're hearing Christ-like echoes, then I think that was the point. He decidedly does not follow a Christ trajectory, though, because Anakin is bought. He wins his victory. He wins his freedom through a victory at pod racing. So young Anakin Skywalker is introduced in Star Wars Episode 1 as a precocious, very intelligent slave boy who is close with his mother. And he is encountered by Jedi who are looking for activity on this planet. They are looking for a Sith Lord, which is very unsettling because they had thought that the Sith were handled. Instead, Darth Sidious is mentoring his charge, the badass-looking, utterly 90s Darth Maul, who has the look of a new metal mascot from those days, with horns and red and black color scheme, straight out of a Korn video. So that episode 1 shows a young Anakin Skywalker who will grow up to be Darth Vader, being liberated from slavery, but his mother cannot be one. She has to stay back home. Anakin wins his own freedom through a pod race, and a pod racer that he built. He also built, it is shown to have built C-3PO, who is naked at this point, no gold plating. So episode 1 is essentially Anakin's liberation. He is won by the Jedis, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan, who, of course, you know Obi-Wan if you watch the original series, but I'm going chronologically here, so we're just meeting Obi-Wan. And in episode 2, you see Anakin as a teen, and he is under the tutelage of Obi-Wan because Qui-Gon bravely sacrificed himself for Anakin's freedom in episode 1. Episode 2 is the ragtag adventures of the impetuous Anakin, who is ingenious in his tactics and very impulsive. And Obi-Wan is a probably 20-something, maybe 30-year-old Jedi who is much more measured and calm. And their juxtaposition is kind of a buddy cop, buddy Jedi force throughout that movie. And so you see that Anakin grows closer to a female senator from Naboo, or excuse me, first she was queen in episode 1 when he saw her and she was beautiful. And now she is in episode 2. I believe she's a senator and has just continued serving her country because the queendom is passed on, like in certain countries now on Earth. It's not that the monarch is very interesting. So in episode 3, Anakin falls. Well, I should add that in the background here, what's occurring is the Jedi. So now Anakin's a Jedi hunting essentially Sith activity, fighting the separatists who are trying to destroy this republic. And we learn in episode 1, Darth Sidious is this Sith on the rise. And we learn episode 2 that he is controlling 2 sides of an army of the Republic because he's serving as Senator Palpatine and now Chancellor Palpatine. And he's actually Darth Sidious controlling the separatists who are trying to destroy the Republic. So he's one of the greatest villains in all of fiction because he is serving as the outward face of civility in the Republic, and he is serving as the hooded, cloaked figure controlling the very threat to the Republic of the separatists who don't want to play by the rules of the Republic. And so Sidious is so Palpatine is trying to arrange for more power by creating a threat. And so I would say false flag, but the fact is I mean, these are real threats he's creating to then fight. Essentially, he he's masterful at creating the conditions to abolish freedom. That's Palpatine's goal in the prequel trilogy, which is masterfully shown what a manipulator does. Here's the psychology of it: create heat, create chaos, disorder, remind people that they're unsafe. And then they're willing to cling to you when you are calm and offer solutions. Of course, he can be calm and offer solutions. He's causing the problems. So he is allied with the Jedi up until episode 3. Basically, someone who keeps them close because he knows that they're his enemy. And what better way to keep tabs than by, showing that, being a false friend. So in this trilogy, you have 3 different things happening. You have Anakin's rise through the Jedi ranks as a powerful Force user who has much fear because he was separated from his mother, older than most Jedis, but still at a young age. And in episode 2, we see that his mother is at death's door because she's been kidnapped by Tusken Raiders. And so Anakin snaps. He tries to find her. He tracks her down. She was stolen. And he unalives all of the Tusken Raiders. And that's his first act of massive, massive revenge and anger. Okay. Because his one attachment figure was taken from him. And his surrogate attachment figure of Padme, the senator in Naboo, where a lot of the action has taken place, where big battles happened, where Sidious, because Sidious's home planet is Naboo, Emperor Palpatine, soon to be Emperor Palpatine, his home planet is Naboo. So much happens there in episode 1. And Anakin's destiny is tied to Naboo in very interesting ways because he is a product. His greatest mentor, soon to be Palpatine, is from Naboo, as is his love interest Padme. So you have Anakin's rise through the Jedi ranks as a high performer, but with much fear, which upsets Yoda. And Yoda is portrayed as a bit sanctimonious. I think it's a good characterization. The prequels ask the question, how did we get to the original trilogy, which is a darkness and an imperial control? How would anyone let that happen to the galaxy? Well, we have the answer that great fear was evoked and people gave away their freedom because Palpatine spoke with a smooth velvet voice of promises. And so one thing happening is the political story. The other thing happening is the psychological stories of Anakin losing his literal mother, losing his surrogate father, Qui-Gon, having a surrogate somewhat father figure who's closer to his age, which I think kind of works against it, a surrogate older brother or uncle character in Obi-Wan. And Obi-Wan is caring toward Anakin, but he's not the seasoned shades of gray figure that Qui-Gon Jinn was. So Anakin could have used someone like that to remember that good can be chaotic good. But he doesn't get that. He gets the sanctimonious Jedi, and then he gets the sweet flavor of revenge and darkness offered by Palpatine. So obviously Anakin is swayed to the dark side. He is so enraged by his fear. Again, fear being the theme of the prequel trilogy. Palpatine rises from a senator to a chancellor to emperor through evoking fear in others and supplying the solutions. So in a book about Palpatine called Plagueis that has his early mentor, Darth Plagueis, it's shown that Palpatine comes from a rather well-to-do family on Naboo. Okay, so he doesn't come from humble beginnings, and he is out of the gate rather psychopathic, according to this book. So I think it's fascinating to look at. Palpatine does not have the rough and tumble beginning as a slave that Anakin had. He comes from wealth, and his machinations and lust for power drive him to throw away conventional morality, and he is adopted as the Sith apprentice of Darth Plagueis, who tries to do many different Sith experiments and defeat death. And, ultimately the story goes, so Palpatine murders his family and also his mentor, because in the Sith, there can only be 2, and the master constantly tries to keep the apprentice down, and the apprentice tries to subsume power and defeat the master, which seems like a really self-destructive cycle that doesn't. I mean, how does that? It's a weird system that seems, the more you look at it, to fall apart. But whatever, it's a movie. It's a movie series. So you look at someone who's psychopathic, like Palpatine, and then you look at Anakin. So in episode 3, after Anakin, so Anakin's still a Jedi, but in episode 3, the battle between the Republic, as ruled by Chancellor Palpatine, or chaired by him, and many strings are pulled, versus the Separatists is thoroughly at a fever pitch. So Palpatine has a secret apprentice, Darth Tyrannus, or Count Dooku, he's mostly known as, who is finally defeated by Anakin. So, and I say finally because he's a big bad of episode 2, and he takes out Anakin's hand. So in episode 2, it's all about mounting stakes. It's about Anakin enjoying his relationship with Padme, knowing that it tears him away from the Jedi. And the Jedi are too ascetic. They embody the masculine virtues and instincts of providing and protecting, of fighting and winning, and of emotional regulation. However, they lean so far into emotional regulation that they don't savor the stuff of life. So think about that. The Jedi are essentially a militant monk sect in space. And Anakin is a passionate individual. He was passionate and precocious as a child. He built C-3PO. He was very mechanically inclined. Ironic, he would become a machine. Very, I'm sure, very intentionally done by Lucas. But Anakin is not an ascetic. He is not a monk. He's not wired that way. And he, as much try as he might, things continue to test him. And you could say, well, he failed the test. He should have let the Tusken Raiders go and not avenged his mother. Sure, that's not what happened. He had lost, he was all along the way, as Anakin is mentored by the Jedi, he continually receives prompting from Palpatine that there's a better way, that the Jedi, in episode 3, it's all about being reminded the Jedi are not infallible. What do they really know that they're doing? Palpatine is the voice of the serpent to Anakin. And so Anakin, who is supposed to be the chosen one to bring, quote, balance to the Force, is harboring more and more fear because he's having flash forwards, premonitions to his lover, Padme, former queen of Naboo that he met as a child, now senator. He is having flashbacks to her, flash forwards, I should say, to her passing away, and it drives him mad with fear. Again, fear. Palpatine comes in, provides a solution. Well, Palpatine was likely the one providing those visions through the Force. So he brought on the very fear that he could then seize to offer solution to Anakin through militarism, revenge, the use of the dark side. So episode 3, in my opinion, is the best of the prequel trilogy. I don't think it's even close. And the stakes are just so high. And you see Anakin slip, and it seems sensical. And I know that the critics would say, well, it was very rapid. Well, I think a lot has collapsed between several months or even years in that movie. And so you see what it's a highlight reel, or a low light reel rather, of what's happening with Anakin. Some things do happen rather rapidly, but what people may be missing is Anakin has fallen in love, which is forbidden from the for the Jedi to do. Again, monks, right? And his fear of losing his spouse cannot be something he reveals to the Jedi in so many words, in his opinion, because they've already been so sanctimonious and so forbidding to him. They've appointed him as a knight to the council on Palpatine's request, but not master. That was his goal. He was appointed to the council as his envoy from Palpatine, but not given the rank of master. And that makes him very indignant. So his talent is great, but so is his ego. And so the ego and the fear together, his emotional instability, right, are what makes him putty in the hands of Palpatine, who is pure tactics. Palpatine is pure, unadulterated psychopathy. Anakin is fearful rage. There we go. That's the master and the apprentice dynamic. And so what you're seeing is in real time how people who have great fear and great desire could be manipulated by those who keep emotionally calm. And I think that's a very, very masterful, timeless story. The sci-fi is the trimming, lightsabers are amazing, but the story is one that as therapists, we have to help people to understand, because if Yoda and if Mace Windu had been more empathic to Anakin and had been able to say, listen, Skywalker, you have to hear the reasons we're doing what we're doing, and we care about you. I mean, it's not that way though. If it would, that would be there would be an alternate universe if it had happened that way. But Yoda and Mace Windu are a bit cold in this. They sort of cut Anakin off and feed into the feedback loop of Anakin trusting Emperor Palpatine more. And so that's the worst thing to do, is to cut off, and then Anakin really goes with the Dark Lord, and he does. So he reaches a point of no return where he fights with Obi-Wan Kenobi because he is trying to end the war. He unalives the younglings. He goes to take care of the separatists because they're in the way of the Emperor forming the Republic into the Empire. And they were a distraction all along anyway, the separatist movement. And it was interesting because Count Dooku was a true believer that the Jedi had it wrong and that there needed to be more flexibility, and he was dispatched and taken out by Anakin. I would say Dooku did what he thought was right. I think he's portrayed as somewhat of a classical antagonist, like in Greek tales of like Achilles and Hector and the different people who are fighting for different causes but portrayed heroically. And the Emperor, I mean, right at the beginning of episode 3, the goal is to have Count Dooku fight Anakin to prove and whoever wins will stay the apprentice of Palpatine, because Dooku doesn't understand that Palpatine is Sidious. And so Dooku kidnaps Palpatine. At the beginning of episode 3, it opens with that, which is a masterful opening in media res, in the middle of action, that means. It's amazing. So Anakin liberates Palpatine. Well, what would have happened if he didn't? Well, Palpatine probably would have used his force power to free himself and in some way either reveal that he was actually Darth Sidious to Count Dooku, and obviously Dooku would have been confused and probably laid off and the attack. But it's an interesting thing because it's set up to test Anakin as a Sith. So what can we learn from Star Wars? Well, we can learn that Anakin loved hard and hated hard, and that he developed quite the anxious attachment. He lost his mother. He was forbidden from romantic love. So you can look at that and say that younglings in the Jedi world were given a more sterile environment of deprivation from parents, sure, but not traumatic deprivation in the way that Anakin experienced. So Anakin is a case of someone with anxious attachment and neurotic symptomology and great anger evolving into Darth Vader, the worst of his impulses, the desire to destroy, the desire to control so minutely, right? Because Vader is this all black imagery of absolute void, of absolute darkness and cold. Well, what does that symbolize? It symbolizes a lack of any suspense. It symbolizes a definite, a definitive. Darth Vader is basically death incarnate, and death is a cold, unyielding state. And in Anakin's life, the one thing he didn't have until the Jedi Order was stability. And then he wanted love from the opposite sex. And when he got that, that threw off his stability of just having the brotherhood of the Jedi. And you can argue, should he have ever have loved? Aren't people entitled to pursue that? I mean, he was thrown into the Jedi. He wanted to be one, but it would have been far better for him to defect and just been kind of a force user that wasn't Sith, because there was the option of being a quote gray Jedi. So we learned from the story of Darth Vader that insecurity and emotion can predispose you to emotional mistakes, emotion-based mistakes, to believing the wrong person, right? So desperation breeds mistakes. Desperation breeds destruction. So that's what I would say about the prequel trilogy. And there truly isn't much better of a beginning, I think. I think that it's a great beginning to the Star Wars world. I know people can detract from the prequel trilogy, and they're free to do so, but you do so at your own peril, because what happens is you miss so much new and so much of the hero's journey or the villain's journey. So the villain's journey, let's really not forget here, is one of all of the developmental markers that the hero faces. The villain acts selfishly. So is it selfish to want to save Padme? No, but it's selfish to try hiding it from the Jedi instead of coming out and saying, look, I've messed up. I have a lover and she is pregnant with child. Cast me out of the Jedi if you must, but we have to stop my visions from coming true. He should have done that. And then it could have been uncovered potentially through Yoda or Mace Windu or other Jedi using their force abilities to see that Anakin's vision was clouded by implanted visions from Palpatine. So Anakin was enmeshed in his identity as the golden boy, especially when he came from nothing. He came from nothing and then he became greatness. And so, of course, would any of us be able to humble ourselves at that point? I hope so. So, okay. The original trilogy is just a masterclass in the idea of the hero's journey. You have an inciting event, you have a mentor figure, you have Luke Skywalker is being raised by his aunt and uncle because obviously by the end of episode 3, Anakin becomes Darth Vader. He fights Obi-Wan, is defeated, is stricken into lava, and has to use breathing machine to become a robot. Great. Not a robot, a cyborg. So that's the beginnings of the tale. And people don't like to know the face of evil often. They want a boogeyman. So Anakin is not the boogeyman anymore. Darth Vader is the boogeyman, and he was so until the prequel trilogy showed that he started as a boy at one point. And so if that bothers you, just recognize any human evil or humanoid evil as it stands, because I guess there's still humans on Tatooine. I don't know. It's never shown how it relates to Earth, but they all look human. Isn't that interesting? So evil with a face and a background and relatability can still be evil, but the boogeyman version of evil that's like a primal, undistilled, untouched version of it is what people get scared by the most and prefer sometimes. So in the original trilogy, Luke Skywalker discovers that his father was a Jedi and he's destined to be great and he's trained to be a Jedi. He joins a ragtag crew. It's a road travel story. He meets Han Solo, a smuggler. He needs to get to the Death Star. He needs to save Princess Leia. He's the only one that can do it. He teams up with Han. He discovers that he's stronger than he realized through the mentor Obi-Wan, who cares for Luke. And Obi-Wan's able to get it right this time. He's able to have a student who's not so motivated by fear and trauma that he can face the obstacles of a Jedi and not be tempted to use his power for evil. So the first movie ends with Luke destroying the Death Star, not knowing Darth Vader's his dad, and Darth Vader strikes down Obi-Wan. There you go. So I know maybe the hate would be good for my views, but the original movie's fine. I didn't grow up with it. I grew up having watched it. I watched it, sure, before I was even double digits years old. I went to go see it when they replayed one of those special editions of it. Lucas added some new footage too. So don't get me wrong, it's a great movie. There you go. Empire Strikes Back, Luke stumbles with his identity, is defeated by Darth Vader temporarily, who reveals that he is Luke's father, struggles with training under Yoda and facing his own limitations. People like this movie because it's dark and it's a good midpoint. It's a good struggle of what the hero must endure. Right? You know, Han is betrayed. Han is frozen in carbonite. And Return of the Jedi is a triumphant film with Ewoks that were made to sell toys. So Return of the Jedi is all about Luke gathering his strength, defeating the father symbolically and literally, ending the Empire for then, right? Not forever. And Darth Vader, in a turn, throws the Emperor down, defeats him. Now, that was really the end of the trilogy. That was a self-contained trilogy, and people loved the tight storytelling, and everything was very symbolic. You didn't know Darth Vader's motivation besides evil. You didn't know hardly anything about the Emperor. What's very interesting is as the series has continued, it's kind of like Darth Vader was the Emperor figure of pure evil in our eyes as viewers, and the Emperor was kind of just this force, like a MacGuffin, like he was in charge. Well, the prequel trilogy showed Darth Vader actually started and always had the seeds of great passion for love. And the Emperor was always this sort of void of evil and black that Darth Vader came to symbolize. So I think that inversion probably annoyed people because they grew up with Darth Vader being the feet and the arms and the mask of the Empire. And the Emperor was basically just a dude in a chair. But the prequel trilogy put some legs on that dude. He was fierce. The Emperor was fierce in that lightsaber battle. In episode 3, he was jumping around. He had conserved his power and hatred for just a moment as that. Okay, so what do I think about the OG trilogy? Fine, good, great stuff. I don't rewatch it a lot. I don't think every story needs to be about a descent into evil. So I'm not taking the edgelord perspective of the prequels. I just find them to be such a masterful cautionary tale of how evil can develop across generations in the form of the Emperor and then be unmasked when it's too late, when people are not discerning. So, all right, the new sequels. Let's talk about them if we have to. So, because of the commentary I've gotten that I look like Adam Driver, a welcome compliment. I have a soft spot for Kylo Ren. In many ways, Darth Vader is a Gen Xer and Kylo Ren is a millennial or a Gen Z. And I'm going to defend that perspective here. So Kylo Ren starts out our journey into the sequels that take place after the OG trilogy. So basically, we've got the prequels or what happens time-wise. Then the original sequel, the original trilogy of Star Wars, that's the midpoint. And then the final concluding stuff of this movies that we have so far is the sequel trilogies that started in 2015 and then ended a few years ago. So basically, it's a repeat. It's a retread. Kylo Ren comes on, on camera. He's wearing a Darth Vader-esque mask. He's got a Darth Vader-esque lightsaber that crackles and has some cool hand guards. I think it looks amazing, the lightsaber. It's unstable, like Kylo, good metaphor. And you see his rise as taking over the Empire's resurrected, resuscitated. It's like the Timu Empire, right? Like the Empire's been resuscitated and revived. Kylo's running it along under Snoke, Emperor Snoke, whatever his name is, Supreme Leader. So, who looks like some kind of monster. So, this trilogy is about Rey, who is from a planet like Tatooine, but not. She finds that she's force sensitive, kind of like Luke, except a female lead. She trains. She learns that she's Emperor Palpatine's granddaughter. Again, like Luke learning he's Darth Vader's son, right? So Luke learns he's Darth Vader's son. Rey learns she's Emperor Palpatine's granddaughter. Very similar thread. So Rey develops her power. She rises up to fight the First Order, which has planet-destroying ships and weapons, just like the Death Star was a planet-destroying weapon. And Kylo Ren is this conflicted adversary who is the grandson of Darth Vader, so he has big shoes to fill, literally and metaphorically. And he's the son of Han Solo and Princess Leia. So Darth Vader, and there's a series called Reign of Kylo Ren that's very good, a comic series, and I've been reading it because I like to check out any kind of Kylo Ren material. But essentially, it's called Legacy of Vader, Reign of Kylo Ren. So Darth Vader grew up in deprivation and was truly the if anyone deserves the title of "I walked to school a mile and back" boomer story, it would be Vader. Kylo Ren grew up with loving parents, and he grew up being trained by Luke Skywalker as his uncle, for God's sake. And he turned still to the dark side, right? So he resembles Palpatine in many ways. He didn't have this real reason, and maybe it was. So one thing that happened was Luke could sense some darkness in Kylo, and rather than Luke, like with his father, Darth Vader, trying to pull out the light, Luke has a moment of thinking to unalive Kylo, standing above him in bed. How creepy. And that's some poor writing. I don't think it really would have worked that way if you had the same people writing that trilogy or the input from Lucas, but whatever. I don't know. I could be wrong on that he maybe did give input. But at this point, the sequels were owned by Disney. So the sequel trilogy starting in 2015, Disney. Lucas had sold Lucasfilms. Basically, you get Kylo Ren being pushed. If he had questions about the dark side, he didn't anymore after Luke. He thought Luke was going to kill him. And he could sense Luke's anger. Kylo goes on to try to forge his own way. And whereas Vader comes from deprivation and grit, Kylo Ren is whiny and comes from... Because people thought Vader was whiny. And then the sequel trilogy is like, hold my beer. Here comes Kylo. So, fine. Kylo... he's pretty badass. He's portrayed as a good fighter with the Force. I mean, he's not nothing. He is something. So he's portrayed as very unstable and emotional in his desire to kill the past. And so he literally I already said the word. Dang it. That doesn't matter. It's probably enough into the video here on YouTube, but I'll look for it and edit it out maybe. But he's enough into, he unalives his father, literally Han Solo, because Han didn't want to be in all three of the movies. So he's in the first one, gets unalived. And then Kylo, tries to destroy any tie to his past. That's his thing, is I don't want to be owned by the past. Okay. Vader's whole fuel is his past, as we settle on and look at in this amazing comic book duology, Legacy of Vader, Reign of Kylo Ren. The great rage and wrath that Vader had was from loss of mother and wife. And Kylo doesn't have anything like that. He has sort of a force vision flirtation with Rey. He has a force flirtation with Rey. They have some chemistry, but ultimately, spoiler in the movies, Kylo turns good and he has to sacrifice himself against a resurrected Palpatine for Rey to live. So that's a very millennial Gen Z thing. There's a sexlessness to Kylo Ren. There could have been something, right? But there wasn't. There is no legacy of his children the same way that Vader left his progeny, right? Because Vader left physical children. Kylo didn't. Vader had romance. Kylo really didn't. Vader had his own grief arc of pain and origin point. Kylo doesn't. He's constantly trying to say, I'm good enough and find his way. So, and he's kind of the whiny brat, the whiny precocious brat born into the Force powers and inheriting. So he eventually kills Snoke. Again, I said that word instead of unalive. Doesn't matter. He unalives Snoke and he takes over the First Order, pretending that someone else did it, that Rey did it. So he can take over the First Order and then have his cake and eat it too. Take it over as being the direct sort of voice, the direct in line, the next in line next of kin of Snoke, and then also having been against Snoke. So amazing. Now, I'm going to be honest. All is revealed in the third one, Rise of Skywalker, to be to some dissatisfying. Snoke is a malformed clone of Palpatine, and people didn't really know what was going on with that. They thought maybe it was Darth Plagueis, which would have been cooler, meaning that was the mentor of Sidious, of Emperor Palpatine. But so I think the psychology of Kylo Ren is he was too edgy, too emotional, inherited Darth Vader's temperament, Anakin Skywalker's temperament for, we could say, emotionality, for heavy emotion and just unwell dealing with disappointment. So emotional volatility, male BPD, whatever you want to call it, like impetuous, petulant child syndrome. I mean, he has a problem with any disappointment. He's extremely emotionally active. He's very much reactive. He's very much like Vader for episode 3 versus the later, more reserved Vader from the original trilogy. Kylo was constantly having tantrums. So he's like, and he wears the mask. He doesn't have the wounding or the run-in with the volcano that Anakin does. So he wears a mask to hide himself rather than to survive. And I think that's a crucial part. That's what symbolically separates Kylo Ren from Darth Vader. Kylo Ren puts on a mask because he is not comfortable in his own skin. Vader puts on a mask because he has no skin left. And he still desires to live and to do evil. But hey, nobody's perfect. So again, interesting way. I thought to contrast the two because Kylo really is like the millennial, what people think of as millennials or Gen Z. And Vader is obviously this Gen X villain. So, he's moody and spoiled. He's a Nepo baby, right? He's the son of greatness, a grandson of greatness as well. So he never got the girl. He died alone, right? He didn't get to be like his father, the swashbuckling Han Solo with great means and with women and great spacefaring adventure seeking. So he doesn't really have a sense of humor. So Kylo comes from two parents who are notoriously funny. So Princess Leia says she'd rather kiss a Wookiee than Han Solo. Okay. And so Princess Leia says she'd rather kiss a Wookiee than Han Solo. And Han Solo is the badass who says, I know, when Princess Leia says, I love you. So think about that. They were about the age that Kylo was. Oh, this is good. Okay. So again, it gets to cultural differences. So I could look up, but I'm not going to spend the time doing it. Harrison Ford. Okay. I am going to do it. How old was Harrison Ford in Star Wars G trilogy? We're going to look at this together, everyone. Mid to late 30s. 33 during New Hope. Okay. Hold that in mind. How old was Adam Driver during Star Wars Rise of Skywalker? Okay. 36. Okay. Bear with me on this. Okay. So Adam Driver was portraying a character the same age as his father was in the OG original, when I say OG original trilogy. Okay. So Kylo Ren is the man-child who the metaphor would be Kylo Ren is the porn-addicted, video game-addicted millennial or Gen Z guy who does not care to meet a woman, do the family thing. His career, like if you look at why is that the metaphor? Well, he's addicted to his own power for the reason just of it being there. He's not avenging anything, right? He trying to destroy his own past. Okay, cool. But he doesn't know, but he can't build anything better on it. So Han Solo was trying to make a buck, have adventure, meet people. He was the same age as Kylo in the original trilogy when he was in his 30s, right? Han Solo going about the galaxy without any means, just a Millennium Falcon, just having the Falcon and a friend, Chewbacca, and working for money and getting involved in adventure and romance. So it's very interesting. Kylo Ren brings a ship with him wherever he goes. He's very solitary. He's, again, in his room, the gamer guy, very low humor capacity, very low emotional intelligence and intellectual capacity for relating to others. And even in a psychopathic way, he's not psychopathic or he would be better at manipulating like Palpatine, right? He's not. He's even worse with people than Anakin. Anakin was great with Padme and very charming and good with the public, but he became ornery and highly emotionally unstable by episode 3. But Kylo doesn't have an experience of losing someone like that except Luke Skywalker, who he brings a building down on and doesn't kill. And so he gives himself trauma. So just to feel anything. That's an interesting point. So Kylo Ren gives himself trauma to try to evoke the greatness potential that Darth Vader had. But he's so terminally uncreative because that's not going to affect him the same way that a loss of a parent affected Vader. Why? Vader had people taken from him. Kylo killed him himself. Very different outcome to your brain when you made the action versus something was taken from you. Why? When trauma occurs, fundamentally, it's being interrupted from something. It's being unsafe and confined. Kylo's not unsafe. He does the unaliving. He takes down his own father. He doesn't lose his father through being human trafficked like Anakin loses his mother. So there's no way for him to somehow one-to-one cheat, to plagiarize Darth Vader's origin story to be compelling. It's almost like the movie's telling on itself. So Kylo Ren is this terminally uncreative sort of shut-in bro who just wants to be told he's great. And his way of doing that is the blueprint of Vader. He could have been more creative. He could have played the role of Palpatine if he wanted villainy and come with the face of the great protector, but then done things behind the scenes to sabotage and get more power. Much, much more of a playground to run with than he ended up giving himself. So unlike Palpatine, he outed himself as a Sith immediately to Luke and to others. And so it'll be interesting for me to collect more on this because he did have that short-term romance with Rey, right? Like he did kiss the girl. He did get the girl in terms of that Jungian like he united with her in spirit at the end, I guess. But I think we have a clear warning here that young men cannot be like Kylo, not just for the villainy, but because he is terminally uncreative and uninspired. You can't live an uninspired life, even as a villain. So what else about Star Wars? I think the strong female character of Princess Leia was ahead of her time. She was a princess like her mother, who was a queen, Padme. So Princess Leia was great. I think the hero's journey is always relevant. I think the view of masculinity in Star Wars is really good as well, because you could be a Han Solo. You could be sort of a Casanova with a heart of gold who decides to meet the right woman. You could be a Luke Skywalker and be less concerned with love in the short term and more concerned with your development of your competencies, because Luke fights and wins. That's a masculine instinct set. He provides and protects, more protects, right? And he controls his fear. He doesn't give into the dark side. He's tempted. He has a vision that he is his father. I believe that's in Empire Strikes Back. So Luke overcomes that. And I think he had an advantage. His aunt and uncle were there to raise him, and they were very emotionally stable. And he did not have the same stakes on him and the same weight on his shoulders. He was not born the chosen one. He was not considered the chosen one. He knew his relatives. He had less trauma. And of course, when he got trauma across his adventures, he responded better, probably because he had better developmental skills in place, better coping skills, better defense mechanisms. So what do I think about the sequel trilogy? they were helmed by by several different directors, and it shows. There's some scenes I would totally cut out that were there just, I guess, to make people feel good sitting in a theater. But we needed a better story. We needed story for the House of Skywalker. I think a Palpatine being who was cast off from privilege. So Rey is the opposite. She's cast off from privilege as Palpatine, as a descendant. I think she's born a Palpatine's son who I don't understand that whole story, and we're given nothing about it. Maybe it's in some other books or novelizations, but Rey comes from nothing. Her parents disappear. I think they unalive. I don't know quite, but I mean that doesn't really matter. Rey is not portrayed as having any growth arc really. She just knows she's great. She goes with it, which is fine. But that was a big complaint. So I will say, I think it's badass that she was able to come from nothing, become great, become a hero. Kind of the opposite of Kylo. She did come from something, but lost it. Kylo came from something and destroyed it. So this was a fun Star Wars. I mean, I never realized I could talk alone for an hour about Star Wars, but I'm not surprised. I'm sure if I had some questions here, I can't read them. Actually, I probably could. Let's do that. Let's read some questions. Let's see what we got. Oh, that's gonna repeat. Hold on. Ask me some questions, y'all. Please. I can't see them if they're there, and that's okay. All right. I gotta pivot up this page, but the view count's good here. All right. That's just gonna keep repeating. I'm gonna have to get rid of that. All right. So let's take a look at some stuff here on X, the everything app. Everything. Yeah. Let's talk about it. Let's look at some star. Oh, good. Okay. View count. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if this is a topic that people would rather had something else, but I mean, this was a pet project for me. Yeah, it was good to talk with y'all, and I will catch you later. I think there were some nuggets here that I can put in some TikToks. Let's talk a little bit. Maybe we get something here. Maybe we get, I really do think there's something to that Kylo Ren having borderline personality disorder because he has contradictory self states, identity is fragmented. He has fantasies of omnipotent control, idealization and devaluation of his father. He sees people as all good or all bad. Okay. Yeah. He saw his family's impact on him as a net negative. So I think that's really, really important. And that's a really interesting thing. I mean, I think I think he follows after Anakin in that. I think he follows the splitting as a defense mechanism because Anakin said the Jedi are you're either for me or against me, or with me against me. And Obi-Wan said Anakin only Sith speaking absolutes. Here's the deal. That's splitting. So Darth Vader splits. He says, you're either for me or you're against me. Kylo Ren splits his bad traits. He looks at his father and that's all bad. He doesn't look at the legacy until he has a force ghost vision of his father as something positive. And he has to come to terms with that in Rise of Skywalker. So I think we could do another episode on the personality types of Star Wars characters and their defense mechanisms.